Welcome everyone to the November 2024 Talga Group quarterly investor webinar. Today we'll hear a presentation from Talga's Managing Director, Mark Thompson, about the group's recent updates. Following Mark's presentation, there will be a Q&A. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question ahead of time. You can also submit a question during the presentation through the Q&A function on Zoom. As usual, we have received quite a few questions. So if we don't get to yours, feel free to get in contact with us after the webinar at info@talgagroup.com. I now welcome Mark Thompson, Managing Director of Talga Group. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome everyone to our quarterly webinar. And how significant it seems to catch up with you for the first time with some of our mine permits achieved after a very long time. So it seems like it's a very fortuitous day for many in many ways. So anyway, let's today do a bit of a recap on some of the latest events through the quarterly, and then I'll keep it pretty short and sweet, and we'll get back to all those questions, which have been numerous as ever. And yeah, apologies to anyone that I haven't been able to get back to personally over the last week or two. You can imagine some of the activity has been taking off with some of these major achievements happening. For those of you new to the company, predominantly battery materials, but including the technology, that's process technology, as well as the way the products work themselves. So while we have the mine that we're developing at the same time, it's all very much downstream processing for us, what could be seen as totally vertically integrated from the mine to the anode, but also materials to make additives into cathode, the silicon anode market, the graphene for the industrial market. So it's basically all graphitic materials based on natural graphite, which is the sort of cleanest and lowest emission form. Just a bit of a summary of the group. Strategically, the growth market is about the fact that we are very exposed to the growth in electrification. We are a leader we've got amongst the world's lowest LCAs, certainly one of the most robust low LCAs. That's a life cycle emissions study. And we're very strategic in that it's the largest deposit in Europe that's been defined to JORC resources, but also importantly, it's classified as a strategic and a critical mineral, both by the EU and other governments as well, like the US. Being located in Sweden is a different proposition for many resource type based projects and technology. But by controlling 100% of it and being in that location, which is super stable, it does have some attractiveness as an investment jurisdiction, as well as other reasons for our customers as well. The power supply is an important part of our operation, the fact that it's mostly hydro and there's some nuclear on the grid as well. So when you put together the low power cost and the high quality power together with our process tech, combined with a super high grade deposit, you end up with this ability to have globally competitive costs, even against the incumbent performers out of China. Our facilities continue to get certified to various ISO levels, and it's credit to all the team that are able to essentially pre-form the commercial operation with these qualities. We're very advanced. We've actually been operating our coated anode plant now for over several years. It'll be 3 years in March next year that the electric vehicle anode plant's been operating. And we've been through the DFS into the feed stage, so we're getting pretty close now. The financial plan's going very well. Obviously, we've got this cornerstone financing from the EIB that we've talked about as approval, but also now we've received 70 million euros in grant funding. So on top of the EIB funding of 150, that's pretty substantial. And, there are plans for the balance. And we have not only an experienced team here in Australia, it's in Europe, we've also got incredible depth with everyone from science into throughout the whole operation. So there's a lot of qualities there, and there's a lot of very, very good experience at actually operating. And we've got all of us are very dedicated to this mission. Just a bit of a statement on the battery market to, I guess, in some ways, particularly over the last year, There's been a lot of commentary about EVs up, EVs down, and that's probably going to be happening again now with some of the politics and the geopolitics continuing around the world. But overall, batteries continue to grow fast. They are still growing double-digit rates. And that's because it's not just about EVs. You have grid, microgrids, storage, domestic batteries just going through the roof. Pardon the pun. But you've got a vast quantity of uses for batteries, including devices, and they're all growing. There's just a general electrification trend. You've got 9 billion plus people now in the world. The population's continuing to grow, and a lot of it, that growth is in markets that have only just started to get electrified. And where you have electrification now, where you have solar, you have backup batteries, you just have battery growth everywhere. And as the costs have come down, the uses of batteries continue to grow. So as a globally exposed anode company, so the market into batteries is because it's not a mature cyclical industry up and down. It's actually an early stage of growth, and it's still growing really fast. So I think when you stand back and look at the bigger picture, you can still see that potential and that drag on it. Vittangi Anode project, again, just a quick intro. So it's integrated with a mine up near Vittangi and the anode refinery down in Luleå. Our existing plan, which was done as a scoping study many years ago, then a DFS, etc., is to start up with 19,500, just under 20,000 tonnes of anode. Although we showed a mining study recently that we can increase that up to over 400,000 tonnes of anode feed material, and we've been working on showing how that works in the downstream. It's 100% owned, and it's the largest and basically best thing there. As you can see from this map, it's adjacent to sealed roads and rail. And of course, we're on the same land mass as our customers, so we can drive directly to them and deliver stuff very quickly to them. And there's a whole series of tens and tens of hydropower stations along this range of hills just to the west of us. And this makes a very good industrialized area for developing a project like this. Very advanced stage now. We completed the feed earlier this year, or about 6 months ago. We made some massive reductions in capital, improved the project quite a lot. The streamlining that we've done has paid off in sort of holding back on what was fairly inflationary forces at the time. Importantly, the mine permit is now granted. For the environmental permit is granted. The exploitation concession is granted. The anode refinery site is granted. So there are still some permitting things needed always across any project up in the mine, but the anode refinery is fully clear, and most of the other major and significant licenses are here, and we can start production about 18 to 24 months after we get obviously the balance of the offtakes and the financing done. So yeah, there's been some major achievements there, and it continues to be seen at a very high level across Europe, and we'll get back to that in question time. I mentioned that for the anode refinery, there's 70 million euros has been awarded to us for the refinery. We also have 150 million euros sort of approval from the EIB at the moment, but the balance of our debt target, which was about 60%, has actually been finalised with a consortium. And then the balance that's left over will be the equity component we have to find, which we are including looking at project equity as well as headco equity and other strategic options. Obviously, we're very focused on doing that in the most beneficial way to Talga. Just a word on recycling, where in the quarterly we had some sort of, I guess, 3 major parts to something about our recycling developments. What I want to point out here is that we're not actually in the business of recycling batteries. However, other people that recycle batteries, they produce what's called black mass. They take used batteries or production scrap, and they will extract the metals from it and leave the graphite, the carbon part behind. Some of them will upgrade it in that process, some won't. Essentially, that's what we're tapping into. That material previously was not shown to be commercially viable to turn it back into batteries. You could use it for industrial purposes, but you couldn't use it back in a battery. And certainly no one could see any commercial side to that. We have had some big innovations lately, and there's rules for recycling there's regulations coming in Europe, in particularly, that the manufacturers have to meet. And so there is a demand for a certain amount of circularity is required, and for the recycling to be a part of that world. So as an anode manufacturer, it is a good idea for us to have an early stage position in that, and that's actually been very, very well received so far. And so, yeah, so essentially it's a different feedstock. What we've done is we've shown recently that you can get commercial anode performance out of this material after going through our purification and coating process. We've also announced agreements previously with Altilium, and now a new one with Aurubis, who's a really major metals recycler in Europe. And we've also won grant funding both at the EU level early in the year, and we just won a significant £300,000 UK grant to take that up to the next level of design engineering of actual commercial opportunities for that. So you might say, well, why, is that such a good idea? Does it compete or anything like that? Not really. It's a slightly separate market that's developing for it. As I said, manufacturers have to have some recycled content at some point, and it also provides us with opportunities for global growth, meaning that by rolling out our modular technology, it could be placed in different parts of the world with that particular feedstock and provide faster growth opportunities than just being in Sweden alone at the moment. Just a word too on Aero, on the lithium project. For those of you that don't realise, we do have this, we still like going out and kicking rocks. I certainly do. I've got a soft spot for it, so I'll always mention it. Exploration on the graphite is not quite so required at this advanced stage, although certainly I'd love to go back out drilling a lot, but you don't actually need it to support the financials that we have. Down on the lithium, we made a bit of a discovery where we found some rocks going up to just under 2%. And these, it's a big area. We're a first mover, so we've managed to get over 270 square kilometres, large areas of pegmatite, and the pegmatites, some of them are outcropping at a very, very large scale. As you can see here, the entire top of the hill is formed. This particular one is, in the region of 300, 400 metres width in outcrop. SQM, one of the world's leading lithium producers, has come in with us on that. They have a minimum spend, and then they can spend up to US 19 million. And Talga's managing that until it gets to a certain scale. But yeah, we're very excited to work with them. We have done some preliminary work. There's like a foreign investment review board sort of thing in Sweden now that just came into legislation earlier this year, and so the Talga has attained that status, but SQM are still going through that process. We expect it to be over pretty shortly, but yeah, when that's done, then the formal JV can start, and things will probably go a lot faster. And that's it. I wanted to leave some time for questions. So yeah, we can get into those. Thanks very much. I guess just a bit of a, if I was just to fly back and have a little recap there, the attainment of the mining permit, the mine environmental permit, was a big achievement. The funding of the refinery, the 70 million innovation grant was a big deal. Getting the exploitation concession also for the mine during this period has been a big deal, and the rest of the business has all been going really well. So yeah, there's been some major milestones got out of the way to continue de-risking the project and make sure that we've got a cleaner run now into building the business as the world permits. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Mark, for the presentation and for updating everyone on the group's activities. So we're now going to move to the Q&A portion of today's session. So first question, Mark, regarding the exploitation concession, why did the exploitation concession take so long to be approved when the environmental permit was granted in April 2023?
Why did the exploitation concession for the mine take so long to be approved? Well, the legislation changed. Historically, you got your exploitation permit first and then the environmental later. Then they changed it to where you had to have the environmental permit first before you could get an exploitation concession. So the court was waiting. So basically, until the environmental permit was decided, they couldn't do the exploitation. Then the government changed that and actually put it back. They sort of put it back the way it was. What they did was they then made it so you didn't need the environmental first before the exploitation. So that changed only in July. And so between July and now, they've managed to process that and apply it. So to be honest, it's actually a sign that the government's getting more proactive about speeding up permitting processes. So they've actually decoupled it now. But we were going through that time when it was changing. So yeah, as I said, it's a good signal that they're now saying you can get an exploitation permit without your environmental and Natura 2000 permitting first. That's a more logical process. And so that change only happened partway through our process, and now it's all done.
Okay, great. For the environmental permit itself, do the appellants have any recourse over the Supreme Court decision to not grant leave to appeal for the environmental and Natura 2000 permit?
No, I mean, the statutory process that allows these appeals, that's over now, and the permit's in force. So they don't have a that's over for in the legal process that exists in Sweden.
Great, thanks. Going a bit broader up to the EU level, if Talga is selected as a strategic project under the Critical Raw Materials Act, what benefits would you expect Talga to enjoy?
Yeah, there's probably a range of benefits. I mean, first of all, to achieve it would be a big stamp of approval from the EU, and while it's difficult to quantify the exact things, certainly from a permitting side, so more for the project going forward, they've set up essentially rules and regulations about how fast things have to be permitted, and that you get special status through those processes. So you'd expect things to go faster in the future. Also, while it's not exactly spelled out, you can imagine that if you're looking at some finance or access to funding or access to any sort of support throughout the EU, then you'll be treated rather well because you'll have this strategic status. So yeah, I think that it'll be very valuable both for permitting and for financing, particularly of expansions going forward, and other parts of the business we may want to open in other parts of Europe.
Great, thanks. Just alongside the Critical Raw Materials Act, moving over to another part of the European Green Deal, will Talga apply for strategic project status under the Net Zero Industry Act for the downstream part of the business or project?
Well, we're considering it. Yeah, so this is separate to what I've already applied for, but we're considering it. We're considering that we're at a really advanced stage with the Anode refinery and in particular, financing and things like that. I'm not sure just how sort of urgent it is. So, but yeah, we're considering it. It's just that it's not really a priority right now.
Okay, great. Well, speaking of other priorities, what are the next critical milestones for the Vittangi Anode project?
Yeah, offtakes, finance, all the stuff that's been a little bit held up from not having line of sight on the permitting timelines and startup. So yeah, there's been obviously a lot of delays and disruption from that process. So yeah, mostly it's on the commercial side right now. So it's about finalising the funding and finalising the offtakes to support that funding. And then going ahead, we're in deep discussions with OEMs and battery makers around the world, really, extending back into Asia as well as into the States, but predominantly, in the EU. As we said, we've had some wins lately on the financing side already, and equity discussions with potential strategic partners are underway as well. So that's, we see that as a pretty vital part of solving the, so-called equity gap in the company, and people being concerned about us, using a lot of company equity to fund the balance. Whereas, we're trying to find alternates to that are less dilutionary and much, much better for Talga in a whole bunch of ways, including the cost of capital. So yeah, depending on how those pan out, those will they're all the next milestones. That's all underway. It's already been underway, and now it's sort of these latest developments give us that, as I said, that line of sight to enter into the next stages of those discussions, which are underway.
Thanks, Mark. Can you give us an update on the status of the detailed plan?
Yeah, that's developing. Yeah, that's progressing well as far as I can see. We don't have a timeline for when that can be when that will be finalised, but we have a bit of a target for it, I guess, that we're tracking to. And I guess all I can say is that the government and the agencies and the authorities and everyone involved, things are progressing. They're not stuck or anything as far as I can tell. It's progressing, and yeah, we'll let you know when it's finalised. I guess it's a little bit like some of the other processes where there's no prescribed timeline on it, but it's definitely.
Okay, good to know. Do you have any comments on the current price of graphite anode, or any comments about future pricing? Any thoughts about the market?
Oh, the market's definitely at an all-time low, frankly. There's been massive overproduction of, particularly in synthetic in China. Subsidized production over there has just been getting dumped around the world, and there's been a massive push on to lower those costs. We can be competitive with that, but it certainly is certainly in the short term, it's a really, really challenging market. The outlook, though, is that can't continue. They're currently literally selling it at cost. So it's a subsidized temporary arrangement. Like, it's not sustainable for them to continue. And this is not just us reading things. This is us actually having meetings with Chinese producers at times. So yeah, definitely pricing is not so good now in the short term. It's got nothing to do with the link into lithium or battery demand. It's really just been purely the swamping of material coming out of China. As the new rules and regulations and tariffs and things come in, you're seeing a lot of cell makers now look around for other sources, and you're also starting to see prices start to come back up now in some types. So the capacity, some of these factories now are running at like 40-50% capacity. They're now at 100% capacity. So the demand's catching up and consuming that material. So we don't know how long it'll be until that starts heading off again, but all of the outlook is still for pricing. And bear in mind that there's different markets. Like, there is no just one market for anode. It's not like just a pure piece of copper or nickel or something where everyone's got this this price. The anodes are sold depending on whether they're high capacity, lower capacity, fast charge, yes, no, these sorts of things. So there's a whole bunch of performance characteristics that go into the pricing of anode. As you would imagine, the difference between different grades of lithium in a rock, and you end up with a chemical that can be traded because it's a very high purity. But if that material performed differently depending on where it was made and how it was made, you'd have different pricing structures. And likewise, Talga's anode products are not sold necessarily into that bulk, what I call sort of Chinese farmer level of quality. It's sort of high performance material. It's also obviously got benefits from the way it's made, with its low CO2 and where it's made, and the ability to have a relationship that's long term, that isn't beholden to it's a controlled situation. So yeah, so pricing is looking actually still very good going forward. But yep, right now it's coming off. It's been extremely low for the last 12 months.
Okay. What progress can you talk about that has been made with the Lulio anode refinery?
Yeah, well, we've previously shown and reported on that we've made preliminary site works there, so that we went basically as far as we felt comfortable to, and then we've minimised spend since to preserve capital and leave the rest of the development in the project financing. I think probably significant things that are still happening is in the areas of like power, water, some of the utilities and stuff still going on there. Importantly, the municipality who owns the park, the industrial park of Herzogenaurach, where we operate there, they are also still installing things and getting that up to speed as well. And there are discussions on between different people going into the park, which include these large green steel groups and some rare earth refining capacity and things like that, about any interactions we can have to continue to improve economics and between ourselves and possible ventures. So yeah, it's developing. It's developing in line though now with our overall project finance.
Great, thanks. Could you please provide some details on the Talnode SI commercialization plans?
Yeah. So I know it stands out and we don't talk about it, but if I do every presentation, all of our products will, obviously be ours. We'll do a workshop. Silicon's progressing really, really well. The pilot's been going great. Importantly, we've learned a heck of a lot from the pilot. We've bad things as well as good, meaning that if there's any challenges about materials or safety or any other issues that have to be dealt with on a commercial scale up, we've been learning those from the pilot. So it's been really, really excellent. Materials going great. The generation, the quality and the performance of the product continues to improve. The team out of Cambridge, UK, has been doing great work, as well as the rest of the group in developing it. We didn't want to talk about it much until the customers, until we line up the customers and the financing and everything else to really show exactly how that project can work. But there is good growing demand for it. It's not seen as a priority for us. Obviously we're now opening up doorways to go ahead and execute Vittangi. So, there's only so many resources we have. However, we are delivering we continue to deliver samples. Those also, some of those samples go, as they get scaled up, end up coming through Lulio, going up through the EVA plant. Customers are receiving it, and there's discussions underway on things like pricing, contracts, as well as where things can be built and under what conditions. So no, it's just the commercialization is progressing. We just don't want to, as I said, talk about it before things are finalized, so that you don't feel that we're losing focus and working on too much. But from what's established, we're actually kicking some good goals there, and I expect it to be an important value earner in future.
Great. Perhaps somewhat relatedly, how is development of graphene products progressing?
Likewise, similar story. Don't want to have too much progressing, but we have talked about recently that we've started selling some graphene into a rubber application, which is quite large volume, and that's been good to see. I would say, to reflect on graphene as a whole, because I know some shareholders have been with us for a long time, since that was the main focus before even the battery materials got going around 2018, 2019. We were sort of pioneers of really bulk industrial graphene applications. So the things you hear a lot about these days, like concrete, plastics, rubber and all sorts of things, paint coatings, obviously, we did a lot of those years ago. If you go back, you'll find us doing conductive, thermally conductive concrete, electrically conductive concrete, positive environmental conditions around graphene coatings in things like concrete and buildings. Obviously, we did the ships. The ships were the largest volume, and that was stunning technical success, to be honest. Even in the application, like getting graphene functionalized so it could mix into those off-the-shelf products like that. We did not do that with the manufacturer. We put it in aftermarket, and then we did it as a dry powder into aftermarket material. So people in the industry could recognize they were significant things. Unfortunately, obviously, the ships got sold. One day we will manage to get hold of one in port, and with the owners hopefully get access to test that material. But all the other work we've done in it showed fantastic success. However, continuing to try and develop those markets, my position at the moment is that when if they get graphene to the point where they want to go into large commercial supply, they come to us for a price anyway. So we don't have to necessarily do the heavy lifting anymore. We have functionalization and processing tech. We know what to do, how to do it. We're experts at that. But if someone else wants to develop some application with someone and they get all happy about it, but when they come and they need, say, hundreds to or thousands of tons of material, they're probably going to approach us anyway for a price and a plan on how it's going to happen. So I think that's a good position to be for us now. So we get exposed to the commercial upside going forward. we don't have so much going on the line currently, but we are still developing it. We still have programs with lots of people, and we'll talk about them when they're material enough to bring out. The other aspect of graphene, of course, is that a lot of it's ending up back in batteries. So any material that we make is a really good application in the silicon anode to build that particle product. And also there's graphene, there's also graphene-like materials, which are a bit in between. So it's turned out to be a fantastic asset in that any graphite parts coming out of our battery materials that are waste or off spec or whatever, if we gather them and we smash the heck out of them and basically separate them back into their atomic scale, into graphene, and then we can use that in any products we choose. Now, right now, the main market for us in volume is probably silicon anodes, and that's what we've developed. At the same time, we've got these things going into rubber to extend the life, or I can't talk too much about the application, but the ability for that to grow is still there in future, but we're going to wait for the market demand rather than us pushing it, if that makes sense.
Do you have any concerns about how a recycled anode product could potentially cannibalize sales of Talnode C?
No, I think it's a fairly different market. It's got more opportunities than anything. So, as I mentioned during the talk, I think during the presentation earlier, that there is actual rules and regulations around recycling of material. Now, that may or may not include graphite at this point because it wasn't technically viable before, but once it's technically viable, then that can come in. It has the effect where, as materials are coming into, say you're Europe and you've got material coming in from Asia and you're recycling some of it and it's available to turn back into battery material, then over time you're able to lessen your imports because you've got this material. Once it's in the system, it's got some reuse to it. So the circularity of it's quite important, and the ability to play a role in that and do it economically is good. Number two, it's an extra feedstock, so you could blend it or have it as a separate product coming through your existing operation. So it's not an entirely separate process that we have. It's closely related for us. So it doesn't have to be a standalone. Three, the supply of the material is growing. So right now you've got a lot of production scrap. You've got a lot of people that have made batteries off spec or have failed in some way. So that production scrap builds up. But what's coming, of course, is a literal tsunami of material coming from used batteries. So that will continue to grow in volume, and it's growing in different parts of the world. So Asia, that stuff's piling up. Right now it goes to landfill. There's no way of using it. It's contaminated with various chemicals from the lithiation and the use of the battery. If it's a used battery, not production scrap. So, and even production scrap can have high levels of copper and aluminium, other metals in it as well. So the purification and reuse of that material is actually very, very difficult. And be able to do it commercially does offer opportunities separate to our integrated mine operation. The total demand, like we are just a fraction of the market. The total demand is there, and the ability to grow profitable businesses in different parts of the world using our system, which is fairly modular. Like you could just take the design we've got for Lulio and plump it in another part of the world and start feeding it recycled material. That's an opportunity to make, a good margin there from a feedstock that's sitting around doing nothing. So it's good for the environment. It looks very good, looks very compelling commercially. The market's so big that, like, volume wise, you're talking about, our first stage is 20,000 tons. You've got a global market that's already now in the multiple millions of tons. So there's more than enough room for both. More importantly, it's about if you can make really good margins, why wouldn't you go and take advantage of the tech you've already invested in? So you already own this. So with a bit of development, and then obviously we'd probably choose to only go ahead with developments with partners for it. But we're certainly seeing a good demand pull from customers, from OEMs, and from battery cell makers about it. So it makes sense to investigate it. It's getting co-funded by, in this case, UK government and the EU as well. So it's a pretty low impact way of getting exposed to faster and larger growth. So no, I do not see it as being a downside for Talnode C to have our Talnode recycled series.
Great. The next question, you may have touched a little bit on this in the presentation segment, but could you just give us an update on the progress of the SQM joint venture?
Yeah, I mean, the JV is awaiting formal commencement because one of the conditions precedent was about this foreign investment sort of review process that we've got in Sweden that only started this year. And so even on things like tenement transfers and stuff like that, you actually have to deal with this now. As we signed the joint venture and we've gone through those stages, we're just waiting on that to come out. But in the meantime, we have all been on site together. We've looked at projects together. Their teams come over and done some work with us on sites, both old and new. And yeah, we're really excited about it. We've certainly learnt a lot from them. Our team has, and we really look forward to doing more with them. At the moment, it has limited us to just like surface light work and working up the working up of drill targets and stuff. I do not have timing on until this process is over. But certainly it's pretty significant. Like I think it's very significant because there's a lot of lithium projects in Europe, like resource projects. I mean, some are brines, but others are hard rock, and some are in Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, Spain, Portugal, the UK, and SQM. As far as I know, this was their first partnership entering into Europe. So for that entire continent, that entire corner of the world, they actually went with Talga. So they see something very useful there, shall we say, and we are very happy to work with them on what is seen as a non-core project, but does have a lot of leverage to success in that part of the world. You can imagine that with any good success, good scale of success, there's potential there for downstream processing using that low cost and abundant power. And of course, right now that continent imports 100% of its materials, so it's going to need some of its own supply. I mean, it's the EU goals, like they actually mandate they have to have 10% of all materials being used have to be extracted within the EU, but you're starting from zero. So that material's, it's not insubstantial. And over time, that grows to like 30-40% if you include the downstream processing as well. So there's some big levers on that, and I think that will provide some really big opportunities and with concurrent financial support as well. So yeah, we are really looking forward to that joint venture getting started in earnest. And but realistically, at this time, that'll be in winter time there. So we'll just see how the timing works out for more of the field work. But things have started.
Okay, cool. Do you have any concerns about other European projects which may have been struggling recently? For example, Northvolt?
No, what happens at Northvolt has no impact on us, but I guess they're a symptom of the difficulties of battery making as compared to making parts of batteries or materials to go into batteries. It's a really, really, really tough business. It's been worked on for a long time in Asia, where they're now dominant, in production of materials. So it's not that surprising that other places will go through ups and downs on their pathway. So while we're a bit of a first mover in making fully coated anode outside of Asia, with our customer demand that we do have, with our qualification plant, with our sort of focus on our own vertical integration and control of what we do, then we've managed to get to this point without incurring really big costs, like being halfway through a project or like them raising whatever billions of dollars and then not making it or doing it into what is a bad market. So I think our business case stands alone, and also importantly, like we took an early view to use a lot of our own technology. That was a conscious strategic choice. So our machinery, some of our machinery we've adapted like it's ours, and some of the processes and things are ours. And so we don't have to import software and people from other places necessarily to make it work and have issues around that, both strategically / security wise, plus speed and the economics. So no doubt it's a challenging environment, but yeah, there's a lot of both government and customers support for having local battery supply in that continent, in that corner of the world that currently has almost nothing. So I think that will continue. And for our volumes, we have more than enough demand or customer volume available to answer that question without relying on just a single group like Northvolt.
Great. How do you envisage Talga's potential expansion?
We'll be doing everything we possibly can. I guess because we're vertically integrated, it's interesting because we're not just stuck with the mine as the source of supply now. As I said, we've also got potential recycled material, and we've also got access to other parts of the world then, because you can have anode refineries built in different places, and you can have different materials going into them, like the silicon anode. So we've got opportunities that we're reviewing of how to do that in a way that gives us maximum upside with minimum downside. And so I guess the first thing what we've done is looked at the basics, looked at the fundamentals, and say, look, okay, we designed that mine a long time ago when the markets were smaller and things were this way and that way. What could it do geologically? What would suit it best? Like what's the right shape of the mill and the output from the mine if you wanted to just develop it based on its geology over a reasonable time frame for, like a certain mine life of 15 to 20 years rather than 40 years, for example, or something like that. So what are the restrictions up there? So we did that scoping study on the mine showing we could actually do, instead of 100,000 tonnes a year of mining, we could do 2 million tonnes a year of mining, roughly, or up to. So then we're now looking at that downstream component of that, which shows that you could feed an anode refinery about just over 400,000 tonnes of con, if you want to. So that's substantial. I mean, it's substantial for the European market, but on a world market, it's not so big. So if you include exports to other places, and obviously it will take a lot of years to bring that in and so forth. So that's one fundamental. The second fundamental is that once you've designed and engineered your processing plant, your downstream refinery, you could just build more of them in different parts, depending on, and then you've got a choice of what to feed them. Is it your own material? Do you just send 100 or 200,000 tonnes of con down to Luleå, then another 200 goes to a plant somewhere else in the world where you've built that refinery? So I think just from the graphite anode space by itself, you can sort of see that you've done a lot of heavy lifting. And from here, it's all about deal making, right? It's just fitting the market, the volumes in with your financing. But from a technology and asset point of view, you've got the ability to do that. Then you do the same thing with silicon, except that the feedstock for that is not our silicon. It's our carbon, but the silicon itself is available. It's metallurgical silicon that we can get access to. So then that does not need the mine part at all. Neither does the recycling as well. So yeah, I think it's certainly in our mind we've been very, very consumed, as you'd imagine, with getting the Vittangi anode project in all of its glory, its vertical integration. To do that, particularly on the mine side, is extremely difficult somewhere like Europe, and frankly, it's pretty hard to do anywhere in the world. And particularly while still owning 100% of it, by the way, and not losing big chunks of equity. So the steps going forward, though, are much, much wider than that, much bigger than that. Now that that's established, we can get that up and running, and then look at how we can more rapidly push expansions of not just that business, but other parts of the business. So to me, there's also this pent up assets and value, which I'm sure is why a lot of shareholders are in Talga. And it's our job to more rapidly get those out. And I like to think that the market conditions have bottomed, both for us, not only in share price and things I can't really talk to, but just in the general sentiment, that you're going to have ups and downs, but overall you've got this path that's always going up in volume. And I like to think we've done so much heavy lifting now, and we're so far, advanced in a lot of ways, that we'll from here it's going to be more about how we utilize that, get a lot of leverage out of it for Talga shareholders and for the value of the company. It's not just about that single project, that's for sure. So I appreciate the question, because that's continuing to grow, as do the markets. It's as I said, stationary storage is now booming. So EV sales drop off, and then the domestic storage market takes off, and then you have the 3C market still going crazy. Like every little thing in the world is getting electrified. Your power drills are getting bigger, newer batteries, people electrifying their lawnmowers. Like every single thing is just you can't, the total volumes of all the small stuff do add up. And interestingly, you get much higher pricing for the smaller, sort of more refined, more boutique applications are often actually high price materials. So those things are actually pretty exciting about getting into as well.
Great, thanks. Well, everyone had a bit of a more streamlined presentation today, but we've gone through all the questions and touched on most that came through the Q&A chat. So, Mark, thank you for your presentation and time answering questions, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone.